Well, it is possible that the wave of emotion I experienced on first arriving in the Portuguese city of Porto back in May 2022 was due to the ecstasy of finally being able to travel abroad again after COVID. But I would much rather explain the cause of my tears on being moved by the delightful sight that greeted me on first stepping off the train and entering the hallway of the city's main terminus station of São Bento. Over 20,000 pictorial tiles, or azulejos, have covered this hallway's walls since 1930, depicting key historic battles, traditions and ways of life from Portugal's past. It is undoubtedly one of the most charming welcomes I have ever received from a city upon first arrival. If only all train stations could be as beautiful. This Portuguese tradition of storytelling in these exquisitely hand-painted tiles can be found covering the facades of a number of places of worship in Porto. The Rococo Igreja do Carmo is adorned by one of the city's largest examples, illustrating the founding of the religious Carmelite order that evidently didn't impress these two ladies. And at Porto's very popular cathedral, so keen are the throng of daily tourists to get inside and catch sight of examples found in the cloisters, they often walk right past the Baroque loggia, missing these endearing floral scenes that fill the inner arches with cherubs amongst the shrubs. What is far more prolific around the city are examples of much simpler, colourful geometric tiles known as azulejos pombalanos. Although many appear to be in need of some TLC themselves these days, these handmade tiles, many of which are well over 100 years old, were used to give run-down buildings a much more attractive appearance at relatively low cost. The art of azulejos in Portugal and indeed in Porto is not one just reserved for a bygone age. At nearly 5 metres high and spanning 40 metres in length, the Ibera Negra was created in 1987 and depicts modern life in the surrounding area, lived under the gaze of one of Porto's most popular attractions. The Ponte de Dom Luís I has linked North Bank Ibera to the port lodges of Gaia on the south bank since 1886. Before then, the only way to cross the River Douro without a boat was to precariously cross a narrow pontoon made from old port boats tied together. Today, pedestrians can cross along the top of the Dom Luís Bridge, and although it may be much more sturdy and well above water level, it still requires a level of precaution, as the deck is shared with Porto's Metro Line D. Worryingly, there seems little to stop one from wandering into the path of the oncoming trains, especially when one is distracted by the breathtaking views and sunsets seen from this vantage point. The bridge itself is arguably just as attractive and photogenic as its surroundings, and most of the passengers who ride the cable car that is conveniently found at the south end of the bridge tend to ride it just to get a better photograph of Dom Luís. I know I did. It is certainly a striking structure, and many find it reminiscent of possibly the most famous wrought iron metal structure of all, the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And they're not wrong to make such a link, as the bridge does have a connection with its engineer, Gustave Eiffel. But many mistakenly associate Eiffel as the architect behind the Dom Luís. He was in fact a student of Eiffel's who deserves all the credit. Eiffel himself designed the Dona Maria Pia Bridge found further down the river. In complete contrast, this railway bridge hardly attracts any tourists at all. One would think that its greater connection with Paris would have at least piqued the interest of some tourists to take the short, leisurely walk down the aptly named Gustave Eiffel Avenue to take a look. But I guess the fact that Eiffel's towering structure is now sadly disused, has no pedestrian access at all, and most tourists are content with the Dom Luís Bridge anyway, should at least give Monsieur Eiffel pride in knowing that he taught his student well. One further bridge of note is the Ponte de Arrabida, found to the west of the city. Its dull concrete structure and the constant roar of 6 lanes of traffic crossing over it 24/7 may may not put this bridge top of many tourist lists to visit whilst in Porto. But for the adventurous, it is certainly worth the trip, as to date the Arrabida is the only known bridge in Europe where visitors are officially allowed to climb its arch. When completed in 1963, the Arrabida held the accolade for having the largest concrete arch in the world, with a rise of over 50 metres. Young locals risk their lives scaling it, sometimes out of boredom, and sometimes as a quick getaway across the river, as police officers daren't or couldn't shuffle up the arch on their backsides and slide down the other end in pursuit. Today, this escape route is blocked at the peak of the arch, yet tourists can safely reenact certain aspects of these misadventures with safety harnesses, tour guides, and a built-in stairway. At the top of the arch are breathtaking views not only of Porto below, but of the concrete lattices that many were dared by their friends to walk across, sometimes blindfolded, just for kicks. Some may be disappointed to learn that the guides do not allow anyone to try their luck on this today. But the walk up and down the arch is just as much an adrenaline rush, with the knowledge one will certainly live to tell the tale afterwards. Rivaling any bridge or structure to be the undisputed landmark of Porto is the Torre dos Clerigos, or Tower of the Clerics. Tacked onto the Church of the Clerics in the mid-18th century, it stands over the city like a huge periscope. It offers anyone who has the stamina to climb its 240 steps stunning panoramic views across the city. As a result, it is a very popular attraction, and it can often be a long wait to get in and a squeeze along its narrow upper platforms to get the best views. So for the less patient who would prefer to enjoy such vistas with a little more wiggle room, a short walk west to the beautiful Jardim do Palácio de Cristal shouldn't disappoint. First landscaped in the 1860s, the Crystal Palace Gardens are an 8-hectare oasis, with hints of timeless grandeur, picturesque views across the Douro, and picture opportunities with the wildlife, if one can catch them standing still long enough. The gardens were named after the impressive exhibition hall that once stood within the grounds, using the blueprint of the Crystal Palace in London for its design. The building sadly fell into disrepair, was eventually demolished in 1951, and in 1952 was replaced with what looks like an alien spaceship from a 1950s sci-fi movie. The Rosa Mota Pavilion, presently better known as the Super Bock Arena, hosts indoor sporting and cultural events with an 8,000-seat capacity. Granted, the pavilion is not the most subtle of architectural designs, yet strangely there is a self-deprecating feel about the structure. The pavilion seems to be conscious of its unique appearance, and rather than arrogantly standing out like a sore thumb, one gets the feeling it is trying to blend in as best it can and not draw too much attention to itself. Visitors can now climb up onto its signature domed roof, where the pavilion appears to persuade one to just look away from its detail and instead take in the best views across the gardens and arguably across the city. The views from this vantage point are indeed attention-drawing, but I'll be honest, the real draw here for me was to pretend I was on top of a UFO.